Let's apply the first criteria, which is the criteria of content on AOIFI fellowships. And if you recall, when I say content, what I mean by it is whether the content of the qualification offers a truly powerful learning experience to you or not. So the first thing we need to look at is the credibility of the content of the qualification. And the big question that we need to answer here is whether we can really trust and believe the content of that qualification to be authentic, factual, and correct. Because it's quite possible that the content of the qualification that you're studying for may actually be factually incorrect, and you wouldn't know. Just because something is written in a book and is neatly presented to you doesn't necessarily make the content to be true. It could be that you are studying blatantly false information. Other times, it could be that the content is incomplete in its description of reality, and as a result of which you end up learning something which is a half-truth, and half-truth is always fully false. So this is a major risk and a serious concern. So the question remains, can you really trust and believe the content of the qualification to be authentic and correct? Well, speaking about AOIFI fellowships, one thing I can say in the most definite terms is that the content of AOIFI fellowships are credible simply because it's based on AOIFI standards. Now, as you know for yourself, these standards have been developed by a team of not less than, I would say, 30 to 40 Sharia scholars, and not just any Sharia scholar in the world, but rather some of the leading Sharia scholars of the industry. And not less than 500 expert professionals have been involved in the development of these standards, and they have been involved as members of the technical groups or members of the working groups, and they represent not less than 50 different countries or 50 different Islamic finance markets over a period of 30 years. So that's one point. Second point is, and I'll move to the next slide for this. The second point is that the AOIFI fellowships are governed by a 15-member AOIFI education board, which in turn has constituted 4 subcommittees to perform various operational tasks in a highly independent, highly objective, and highly transparent manner. This governance structure that has been set in place for the provision of AOIFI fellowships is an important step to ensure that the credibility of the content of the qualification, and not just the content actually, but rather all the aspects of the qualification, such as the examination process, the translation process, and whatnot, meets the highest standards of excellence, so that you can be rest assured that the content that you're studying for is factually correct, it's authentic, it's genuine. Okay? Okay, now while at it, let me share the names of the members of the AOIFI Education Board with you. The board was actually set up in 2017 and which currently comprises of 15 members with a mix of Sharia scholars, regulators, accountants and auditors, academicians, and other areas of specialization as well, which are represented. And they represent 10 different Islamic finance markets, such as the UK market, the US market, Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Bahrain as well. So these are the 10 markets which these members represent. So all in all, the point I was trying to make was that if you want to judge the credibility of AOIFI fellowships, then these are the points that I've shared with you. Now let's come to the second point involving the criteria of content, which is the point about consensus. And here the big question we are asking is, who and how many agree that the content of the qualification is correct and of the highest quality? So if I'm just claiming that AOIFI fellowships and the content of the AOIFI fellowships is correct and of the highest quality, then that doesn't really hold ground. And this is important because no matter how good the content is, you still need to have it peer reviewed. And and you need to build consensus of the stakeholders with regards to its quality. So again, if we apply this criteria on AOIFI fellowships, we come to realize that given the fact that these fellowships are based on AOIFI standards, which are considered to be the benchmark of best practices in Islamic finance, and which are globally adopted and implemented by regulators and Islamic financial institutions in the world, we can safely assume that the content of AOIFI fellowships are accepted to be correct and of the highest quality by important industry stakeholders from all over the world. Okay, the next point is about the content of the qualification, and here the nature of the content of the qualification. And here the big question is, or the big question that we are trying to answer is whether the content is theoretical or practical, or is a combination of both. If the content is entirely theoretical, then it means that the learner might not be able to excel in the real world setting. If, on the other hand, the content is entirely practical, then that also is problematic, because that it means that the learner doesn't necessarily have the conceptual or the technical or the philosophical understanding of how things actually work. And as a result of which, that professional won't be able to be creative and innovative in a real world setting. So both the scenarios are equally problematic positions. As far as the AOIFI fellowships go, we've done a level best to ensure a fair balance between theory and practice. And this is perhaps best manifested in the fact that in order for you to become an AOIFI fellow, you not only need to pass the module exams, which is the theoretical aspect of AOIFI fellowships, but also fill a 1-year practical experience requirement, which is a practical aspect of the AOIFI fellowship. The next point is about the relevance of the content of the qualification. And here the big question we are asking is, how often is the content updated? Now, this is important because if the content is not periodically updated to reflect the changing needs and requirements and expectations of the industry as a whole, then the qualification risks becoming obsolete and irrelevant. And I can personally attest to the fact that this is a very important point, something we are also struggling with, because keeping the content updated is by no means a small feat. As far as the AOIFI fellowships go, what we have done is, or rather what the AOIFI Education Board has done is to set up the Curriculum Review Committee, the CRC committee, which has the mandate to ensure that the AOIFI fellowships continue to be updated and kept relevant on an ongoing, continuing long-term basis. Now, there's another important point that I want to make here. You see, update is one thing, and revamping is another. At one point in time, you come to a conclusion that you must revamp the qualification because updates no longer work. And you need to revamp. When I say you need to revamp the qualification, I mean you need to rebuild the qualification from ground up. And that is exactly what we did in 2017 when we revamped the SEPA qualification and relaunched it. We are right now revamping the CISA qualification as well. And we believe that given that it's almost 90% work has been completed, we believe that it would be relaunched, rather the new CISA fellowships will be launched by the end of this year or by next year, inshallah. Let's talk about accessibility. And by accessibility, I mean whether the qualification is available in the language of the preference of the candidate. Again, this is an important point, because if the content of the qualification is only available in English language or Arabic language, And if you do not have proficiency in these respective languages, then obviously you will not pursue those qualifications, which means that there is an accessibility problem. Now, as far as the AOFI fellowships go, what we can say is that we understand this issue, and that's why we are aggressively working towards making the AOFI fellowships available and accessible in at least 4 different languages within the next 2 years or so, inshallah. And those languages would be English and Arabic, as well as French and Russian languages. Okay, so to sum up, I believe I can say with confidence that based on the criteria of content, we can say that the AOFI fellowships are highly credible. They enjoy industry-wide consensus, offers a balance of theory and practice, is relevant and available and accessible in multiple languages. This again is my reading, or rather my application of the criteria of content on AOFI fellowships.
Islamic finance learning made simple and memorable.